Welcome to the Window Wisdom Podcast, your guide to replacement windows and more. Welcome to episode number 37 of the Window Wisdom Podcast. And today we have a special guest, repeat guest. Bob has been with us on this podcast before, so that makes him a veteran, the second time on the podcast. Bob Long, our territory representative with Infinity from Marvin Windows. Welcome, Bob, back to the podcast.
Hey, Ted. Good to be back. Hello, everybody, again. And it's great to be here.
Well, we are extremely grateful to have you back, especially talking about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to allow you to share your story with us, which is a story of faith, gratitude, and God's protection. And we happen to be involved in this experience.
That's right.
And had to witness it firsthand, and it just makes it very powerful. And I think you've got a message here that you can share with people that has definitely helped me in my own life, and I think you can help others by just sharing your story. And appreciate you taking the time to do that with us today.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
So, Bob, so obviously, just brief introduction for yourself. We're obviously in the window business together. You support us with our Infinity fiberglass product. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the window business, and a little bit about your family and where you live now.
Yeah. So my start goes way back to, and I'm going to show my age here, Ted, 1981 when I graduated high school. I got right into the lumber and trim business back in Detroit, which is where I'm originally from. Worked for a family-owned lumber company up there for about 10 years, and then kind of gradually got away from that into mill work, and then eventually back in 2012 took a position with Marvin Windows and Doors as the territory manager for Infinity from Marvin. As I mentioned a minute ago, I'm originally from the Detroit area, but I always ask people not to hold that against me. But moved to Indianapolis in 1994 with the family, took a career change position that took me to Indianapolis. We've been there since 94. I'm married, 3 children and 5 grandchildren. And as you know, Ted, grandchildren are just absolutely fantastic. Love them every day. You can spoil them, sugar them up, and then give them back to mom and dad, and away you go.
Yes, sir.
So yeah.
And we got to meet your family, and wow, what an awesome group of people they are, and we know how much they love you. So, well, Bob, why don't we jump right in? I'll kind of set the story up a little bit. One of the things that we do as a business here is we visit with a lot of other dealers throughout the country and try to look at best practices together to try to improve our business of offering windows and doors and our processes and everything. And you were instrumental in setting several of these trips up for us. And this one happened to be in July of last year. And we were going to visit the dealer in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and then we were going to Cleveland, Ohio, and we were going to finish up in Fort Wayne, Indiana,
Right.
And visit several dealers and try to learn and share as much as we could. So why don't you take us from there? We get the trip set up. You plan to be our chauffeur on the trip, right?
That's right. Yeah, and Ted, thanks for the introduction on that. As far as what started happening, there was a lot of planning, obviously, that went into that. A lot of communications before and during, the trip over to Pittsburgh. My weekend actually started in Detroit that weekend. We had a bunch of family functions that we were attending in Detroit on Saturday that weekend. In fact, I had the honor of officiating a celebration of life ceremony for an aunt and an uncle that had passed away fairly close to each other. So I did that with my side of the family. We had a graduation party on my wife's side that afternoon. Ironically, that was the same Saturday that President Trump had gotten shot in Butler, PA. So there's a bit of a
Oh,
tie in
wow.
there. So
Yeah.
we were all watching that unfold as it happened that afternoon. And then Sunday, we got together for lunch with a few of my wife's brothers and sisters, and then everybody kind of went their separate ways. I had to head over to Pittsburgh, as Ted mentioned, to pick him and Jonathan up, as well as another coworker who was had started his second week on the job. I was the first territory manager that he was going to be shadowing. So the three of them were flying into Pittsburgh, and I was driving from Detroit to meet everybody there. The rest of the family drove back to Indiana. So everything was great. The communications were great on the way there. We were kind of texting each other and making sure the flights were on time and all that good stuff, and everything was going great. I got about an hour outside of Pittsburgh, and that's where a decision I made, I wouldn't say came back to haunt me, but I often think about the decisions that we make in life and the results of those decisions, whether they're good decisions or bad decisions. And in my opinion, the decision I made was not a bad or good decision. It was just a decision. I could have either gone to the airport first and sat in the cell phone lot for about an hour waiting for your guys' flight to come in, or I could have gone to the hotel first and checked in, threw my luggage in my room, and then went to the airport. So I chose the latter. I went to the hotel first, and I often think about that. If I'd have chosen the other decision, would all of this have not happened? So I did go to the hotel, checked in, threw my luggage in the room, and made my way to the airport. On the way to the airport, I was on an entrance ramp getting onto I-376 there in Pittsburgh, a two-lane entrance ramp. I was in the right-hand lane. And unbeknownst to me, I found out later that somebody was actually following me. Somebody had been behind me and then had actually cut off two cars in the left lane to get up to me. I never knew that, never knew what was happening. And when they got up to me, they just started shooting into my car with a rifle. The first three shots, I never even remember the first three shots, but the fourth one is the one that hit me. And it hit me just behind the left eye. Caused a lot. When I say it caused a lot of damage, that's probably an understatement. It caused a tremendous amount of damage when it went in. Did not incapacitate me right away. I was actually I was conscious for about a minute and a half to 2 minutes. You know, enough time to remember things I wish I could forget now. But so there was a lot of things that happened in the car that I won't get into, but one of the things, there's a lot of little mini miracles that I think happened that day. And one of those was there was a taxi cab driver that was right in back of my car when it happened. And that was one of the last memories I have before I lost consciousness was the taxi cab driver coming up to the car and asking me if I was okay in the car. And at the same time, he was opening up the door. And I won't say exactly what he said because it's a little bit graphic, but by the tone of his voice, I knew that what he saw was pretty horrific. And I didn't know this until afterwards because it was at that point that I had lost consciousness. But that man took the shirt off of his own back and he balled it up and then put it over my eye, the wound on my eye. And probably could have saved my life because there was extensive bleeding at that point. And I don't remember a whole lot after that. I don't remember the firefighters or the paramedics getting there. I remember them loading me into the ambulance. And then the only other memory I have is when they were taking me into the emergency room. And it was a couple of memories in the emergency room that are very vague. And then that was it for about 36 hours. In the meantime, Ted and Jonathan and Bo are left at the airport kind of stranded. So I chuckle about it a little bit now because Jonathan had the opportunity to pick me up at the Atlanta airport a few months later. And I chuckled and I said, well, at least you didn't stand me up. So I laugh a little bit about it now. I like to say that I would rather laugh about this than cry about it. So, and I like humor. So we put a lot of humor into this. But yeah, and as Ted mentioned, the ironic thing is that it was he and Jonathan that were coming to Pittsburgh to meet with me there so that we could travel and meet some other dealers after that. So obviously I did not get to finish up that journey, but I'm really grateful that Ted and Jonathan were able to take our new guy. Again, he was his second week on the job, take our new guy and finish up the trip with our new guy. So I thank you guys for doing that.
Well, I tell you, from our perspective, Bob, this was probably one of the scariest moments, that I'd ever witnessed. You know, First of all, just having the feeling that something happened to you, knowing you, and knowing that you would never stand somebody up when you're supposed to pick them up. Um, so we didn't have a good feeling from the beginning, and that's when we started calling around and trying to locate you. And we called the dealer up in Pittsburgh, and great family there, and they jumped in full force, started making calls, and I don't know if we shared this. We may have shared this with you, but we actually found something on a police scanner app that said, described a male that had just been shot, and and we just kind of knew. I mean, we went to the hospital and we saw you there, and I don't think they really had cleaned you up fully at that point. We went back, and um, I can just remember thinking that didn't know if you were going to make it, and it was pretty impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. And, several months later, I'd been speaking to my daughter. My daughter was the first one in the family to get there that night. And I'd asked her, I said, so, what did you walk into? Because I was kind of thinking, what did Ted and Jonathan and Bo and the folks in Pittsburgh, what did they walk into that night? And again, we laugh about it a little bit now. I know that's kind of a weird thing to laugh at, but she says, you want to see? And I said, well, yeah, you got a picture? She had snapped a picture when she first got there. And, Ted, you're right. It wasn't pretty at all. It wasn't pretty. It was pretty graphic, and I could see why a lot of people thought that I just wasn't going to make it, including my own family. But I did make it. I did survive by the grace of God. I talk a lot about, being in the car that day, and some of the things that happened afterwards. And, you know, one of the things that I said to God in the car that day was, um, if you're going to take me today, God, I'm ready to go. And I was, and I still am, as a Christian man, as a faith-filled believer, um, I'm always ready to go. It's when it's our time, it's our time. And I really believed it was my time that day. It wasn't. He sent me somebody to help that day. Because I said, if it's my time to go, I'm ready to go. But if it's not, I need some help. And that's when that taxi cab driver walked up. But I made it through that. Spent about 4 days in ICU. They had to do a couple of surgeries. The other mini miracle that I talk about is the fact that based on where this incident happened, the closest hospital is called UPMC Mercy Hospital in Pittsburgh. And they are a top 10 hospital in the country for eye trauma. So that was the fact that I ended up at that hospital, I don't think was a coincidence. Um, so I spent about 12 days in there in total. Went home at the end of July, and when I got home, I was not able to lay flat in bed for almost 4 months. So uh, the kids had fortunately bought me a brand new recliner about a year earlier when I was going through some cancer treatments, and a very comfortable recliner, fortunately. So I sat in that recliner and had to sleep upright in that recliner for about 4 months. But it gave me an opportunity, sleeping in that recliner, to kind of revisit the Bible. And I'll be quite honest, I was not at that point. I had not been a regular Bible reader for a little while, so it kind of gave me an opportunity to jump back into the Word. And my favorite book of the Bible has always been Matthew. And I remember coming across Matthew 6:15 one night, and it says, "If you cannot forgive others their sins against you, how can your Father in heaven forgive your sins against him?" And that just kind of stopped me right in my tracks when I read that. And I felt like God was saying to me, you've got to forgive this guy that shot you. And that stunned me, because the realization that I have to forgive a guy that nearly killed me, um, that put me through both physical and emotional stress, and put my family through emotional stress, and my friends as well. I've got to forgive this guy. And I wrestled with that for several days. Not really wanting to have to forgive somebody like that, but ultimately God won, and I made a decision to forgive the guy in a very public way. I had 3 separate media interviews scheduled for the Pittsburgh media over the next week, and on each of those media interviews, I made it a point to say that I had forgiven the guy that had shot me, with the caveat that even though I forgive the guy, he still has to be responsible for his actions. He broke the laws of the city of Pittsburgh, the state of Pennsylvania, and he still had to be responsible for his actions and to pay the penalty for that. So that trial, as we speak, is still ongoing. It's been delayed a couple of times, but again, the basis of this story, and I'm also writing a book about this as well. The basis of that is forgiveness, and that's something that I preach a lot. Every time I get an opportunity today, when I come across people and I get to tell my story, that story also includes the act of forgiveness. So I think I'm doing what God wants me to do, what He's commanded me to do. I think it's my new calling in life now. So that's what I do, and I'm proud to do that on behalf of the Lord. And so yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Well, we're thankful that you're spreading that message. It is a difficult message sometimes to, especially in your circumstance, to really understand how we can fully forgive somebody like that. How has this really changed your perspective on life and your work?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ted, because for the first several days in the hospital, I really had some very serious doubts about whether or not I'd be back to work. Um, but I had a lot of support, including the president of our company. Uh, this happened on a Sunday night, and Tuesday morning, he was there at the hospital, uh, visiting with me and my family, comforting the family. Um, which speaks volumes about the company I work for, Marvin Windows and Doors. To have Dan Marvin there, and Dan could have selected to have anybody else under him go and visit me in the hospital, but he chose himself to be there for me on Tuesday. He tried to get there Monday, but couldn't get a flight there on Monday, so he got there Tuesday morning. In fact, Tuesday morning was the first day that I was uh, coming out of the anesthesia and back into consciousness, and he was one of the first faces I saw there on Tuesday morning. Um, that just not to jump around, but ironically, I've got 3 very, very, very faint memories of Monday. I was sedated all Monday. I had a vent tube in, but I remember, and ironically, Jonathan was one of those memories that I have. Uh, I couldn't tell you what time of day it was, but I remember waking up for about 5 seconds, and I heard Jonathan saying, "Hey, buddy, we got to leave. Uh, we love you, and we're going to continue to pray for you." That was about 5 seconds, and that was out again. And there was only 2 more memories I have with the rest of the family on the day Monday. So I thought it was pretty relevant that Jonathan was one of those memories. So, anyways, Dan was there on Tuesday. The family, they stayed there for the whole 2 weeks with me. You guys were there on Monday, most of the day Monday. Um, the family out in Pittsburgh, John and his family were there almost every day for the next 2 weeks to support the family. So that, I think that really gave me the incentive to want to get back to work. Realizing that, I had a lot of people in our dealer network that I'm very, very close friends with that I really wanted to get back out and see those people again. So it took about 4 months of recovery. I wasn't able to drive for almost 6 months. Started that very slowly and really just started driving for work about 2 months ago. But I'm back at it full time. I'll obviously never be back to normal, but I'm kind of at the new normal now. I've accepted a new normal. It's just to your question, Ted, how has that changed me? It's just given me really a new perspective on life in general. Uh, to appreciate the things that we already have, especially family and good friends. So that's, just that perspective on that part of life is just, and of course, the fact that, God has given me the initiative now to do something different in terms of spreading His word in the terms of forgiveness, and putting that into written form in terms of a book as well. So there's a lot more purpose that I have now in life.
Yeah. Well, and I know the title. I don't know if you want to share it.
Oh, yeah. For all you sports fans, well, I guess I need to preface it by saying that I've had three major life events in the last 2.5 years that could have and maybe should have taken my life. The first was a major truck accident. I got hit by a truck back in October of 2022. It ended up breaking my sternum, sending me to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, the CT scan showed that I had cancer in my chest. So that was the second event. And then the third event was the Pittsburgh event. So I called the book, or I'm going to be calling the book, Three Strikes and I'm Not Out. So a story of trial and forgiveness. So
can't wait to read that.
It's probably a couple years away yet. I've got a writer that I'm working with. I've got some of the chapters written already. And then Ted and I have got to work a little bit on the last couple chapters to get their perspective, him and Jonathan's perspective on that's going to be part of the book. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, we didn't want to leave you. We didn't want to continue on, but your family being there and really encouraged us, and they just said, "Hey, this is what Bob would want." Honor
And that's
Bob
what I would
with
have
this. And as tough as it was, we did continue on, and wasn't the same without you, obviously. And our thoughts were with you the whole time. But really appreciate you sharing your story.
Oh, glad I
today.
could do that.
It's like I said, it's got the potential to help a lot of people that have been in some tough positions, and especially when it comes to forgiveness. When somebody's really done you wrong, just appreciate you leading that example.
And I'd like to leave with one more quick story, if I could, that kind of goes in along that same line of forgiveness and talking to the right people and trying to get that message out. And Ted, you may have not even heard the story. I told it yesterday at your sales meeting here at the store, but I was in Pittsburgh, the scene of the crime, about 2.5 months ago, before I was actually driving again. And our dealer out in Pittsburgh ended up taking me back to the airport so I could fly home. And I was going to fly home. I had a layover in Detroit, and then from Detroit back to Indianapolis. And I got to the airport a couple hours ahead of time, like we're technically supposed to do. And it was one of those days in the Midwest that there were storms rolling through and flights were being delayed and canceled. And I get to the gate and find out that my flight was delayed by about 20 minutes. So now I'm 2 hours and 20 minutes early. So I figured I need to do something to occupy my time. So I found an empty row of chairs in the gate area, had one single person sitting way on the end of the aisle. So I sat right down in the middle of the aisle and just started checking some emails and doing some work on my smartphone. And because I have a patch on my left eye now, I have no vision to my left. I didn't realize, but at some point in time, somebody had sat down right next to me, the seat right next to me on my left-hand side, not 3 seats down or 4 seats down, but right next to me. And I don't know how long this person had been sitting there, but at some point I did turn my head and I saw somebody, and it was a young lady. She kind of startled me because I didn't know she had sat there. And I just looked at her and I said, "How long have you been sitting there?" And she said, "Oh, about 10 minutes. And we got into a conversation. Turns out her flight had been delayed as well. She was heading to South Carolina to visit her boyfriend. She told me that she was born and raised there in Pittsburgh, and she knew my story. She remembered seeing it on the news, and she was very apologetic because it was her hometown, right? Come to find out, she's a flight attendant for Delta as well, and she was on her day off. So we talked for quite a while, maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then she realized that her flight was being delayed to the point that she was going to miss her connection. So she had to get up and go to another gate and try to find another flight. And I thought that was the end of it. A couple weeks later, I'm at church, and the secretary from church walks up and gives me an envelope. She said, "This girl called about a week and a half ago, said she was talking to you in the Pittsburgh airport. And she wanted your home address so that she could send you a card." She said, because of privacy reasons, we couldn't give her your home address. So we told her to send the card here. So I grabbed the card. I didn't open it up in church. But when I got to my car after church, I opened it up and looked at it. Beautiful card. Just written on both inner sides of the card, page and a half worth of talking about what we talked about in the airport and forgiveness and things like that. And then she also included a picture of herself. Turns out that she's the current Miss Pennsylvania 2024.
Oh, wow. How about that?
I had no idea. I had no idea who I was talking to. And so, the point is that, when I tell that story to people, especially people like that can then relay that story to many, many other people.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, that's, God puts that stuff in motion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he puts people like that in our place just to kind of further his word. So I thought that was just a great story.
That was. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your testimony with us today, and just hope those listening to this is just received a blessing from it. I know I have.
Amen.
So, thank you, Bob.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Thank you for tuning in to the Window Wisdom Podcast, brought to you by North Georgia Replacement Windows. Be sure to rate and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at NG Windows and visit our website at ngwindows.com. So whether you're exploring replacement windows and doors, or you simply need someone to pray for you or your family, we're here for you. Until next time, take care, and we'll connect again on the Window Wisdom Podcast.